Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. Today I am back in California filming with my buddy Vincent at Kenny's shop. It's called LTBN Automotive Service. That stands for Lexus, Toyota, BMW, and Mercedes. So they're experts in all four of those manufacturers. What we're going to show you how to do today is we are going to install some really awesome aluminum skid plates that come from the company Asfir 4x4. They make them in 1/4-inch aluminum. They're really well built and designed, sturdy. The installation is going to go really well because the fitment is exact and they have good instructions that come with them. So Vincent and I are anticipating a very straightforward and easy install. When it comes to aftermarket skid plates, they usually come in two main types, steel and aluminum. The steel skid plates are strong, but they are very, very heavy. I have steel skid plates on one of my 3rd generation 4Runners, and it adds a lot of extra weight. The huge benefit of going with aluminum skid plates is the weight savings, because every pound you add to your rig, that's going to be an extra strain on your drivetrain to be able to get you to where you're going. And especially when you're going uphill, the heavier you are, the more strain that you're going to put on your engine, transmission, transfer case, differentials, everything. Now, Asfir just doesn't make aftermarket aluminum skid plates. They make a whole host of other aftermarket parts to armor your rig. They make rock sliders, they make winch mounts, and winch mounts maintain the OEM bumper, but it allows you to put a winch on the front of your rig so you can recover your vehicle and not be stuck somewhere out in BFE. And they also make complete winch bumpers to replace the OEM bumper. Now, you know that we are Toyota and Lexus guys, but Asfir makes armor for a whole host of other manufacturers and models, too long to list. So if you do have another manufacturer vehicle, go on their website. We'll have a link in the video description and see if they make aftermarket skid plates, rock rails, winch mounts, winch bumpers for your particular vehicle. With all that said, we are going to get started with this job. As you see, we have the vehicle already up on a lift, which is going to be really nice for us to be able to film this much easier and to be able to get really good shots for you. You can absolutely do this job on your back. We have installed plenty of skid plates laying on our back, and most likely if you are a DIYer that's going to be using this video to install skid plates on your LX470 or your 100 series Land Cruiser, you're most likely going to be doing it with your vehicle up on jack stands in your driveway or in your garage. So don't let the fact that we're using a lift for this install deter you from doing this job yourself. Now, if after watching this video install of these Asfir skid plates on a 100 series or a Lexus LX470 and you think it's above your ability, Asfir has qualified shops across the country that could install these for you. So on their website, they have a link that you can check to find an installer in your area of the country. With all that said, we are going to get started with this job. We have all the skid plates laid out on the ground so you can see them before we start installing them on the vehicle. So this is the front skid plate. This protects the area underneath the radiator and engine. Then we have what is called the gear skid plate, and that protects underneath the transmission area. And this is the cross member that goes with the gear skid plate. Next, we have the transfer case skid plate and the cross member that goes with that. And then finally, we have the gas tank skid plate. And what is nice with all of these skid plates is they have labels on them to identify what they are. They have all of the fastener bags with a schematic, so it shows you exactly how the skid plate goes on and the orientation of the bolts, nuts, and washers. So it's all very well organized. And something that we didn't show in the video is the unboxing of them and unpackaging of them. They come very well packaged in sturdy cardboard boxes, and there's a heavy plastic wrapped around each one. So they're very well protected, and they should get to you in good shape, provided the shipping company wasn't trying their best to destroy them by throwing them off the truck. But they should arrive to you in very good shape. The first thing we're going to do is get the OEM skid plates off. There's a front metal skid plate that goes underneath the radiator and part of the engine, and then there's a plastic skid plate behind that. Unfortunately, we don't have the plastic skid plate. Vincent ditched that a long time ago, but removing these skid plates is really straightforward. It's 12mm bolts. You just have to find them all and zip them out. I'm going to use this Milwaukee long reach ratchet, a long 3/8 extension, and one of my Koken 12mm sockets to zip this front skid plate out. There should be one there, but there isn't one there. This is most likely going to look a little different on your rig because this bolt for the skid plate is supporting this mount for this King reservoir. And here's the front skid plate off. And like I said, you'll just have to remove a few more fasteners for that plastic rear skid plate, and then you'll be ready to go to install the Asfir aluminum skid plates. For a job like this, if you have buddies that can help you, it can make a difference. So when you're lifting up the skid plate and getting the fasteners going, it helps out to have an extra set of hands. But if you don't have an extra set of hands, just getting a hydraulic jack underneath to lift it up in place while you get the bolt started, whether it's a regular hydraulic jack or a transmission jack, that will help you out immensely. These skid plates are pretty light, so you could just push it up with one hand and get a bolt or two started, but it's gonna be easier on you if you use a jack or a friend. And so for this video, I'm gonna be utilizing our buddy Viet to help me lift these skid plates into place and get the fastener started. So here we go. Wait a minute. What the hell's going on here? That's not fitting right. So as the saying goes, more mods, more problems. Because Vincent has a front differential drop and he has an aftermarket front bumper, the fitment of the skid plate wasn't gonna work. So what we did is we went to a local hardware store, we got some longer bolts and some spacers to make it work. And we wanted to tell you that because you might be in the same situation. It's not the fault of Asfir because they can't accommodate every different bumper and thinking about diff drops and everything. They come up with the design they think it's going to work for most people, and that's what they go for. So it's very common that when you're putting on aftermarket parts based off of how you've modified your truck in the past, it's going to change things. So we're going to make it work. So we're going to take the skid plate down and just show you the spacers we bought in case you find that you are in the same situation with an aftermarket bumper and you have to do something similar. So we're going to get this skid plate off now that we've figured out the spacers that we needed, and it does need some tweaking. We could have went with a little bit lesser of spacers, but we don't want to waste any more time going back and forth to the hardware store. So Vincent will probably dial it in a little later, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to be able to finish the job because the main problem was the front end of the vehicle. The other one shouldn't give us any problems. Another thing we noticed when we were fitting the transmission skid plate with the front skid plate, we noticed that the 2-post lift arm in the front was getting in the way of the skid plate. So we are going to have to get on our backs to get that skid plate in place. So we're going to have to lower the vehicle to the ground, get the vehicle lift arm out of the way, get that one started and then relift the vehicle. So a little extra work. Before we install the front skid plate with the longer bolts and spacers, I wanted to show you the two things that are interfering with the proper fitment. This part of the aftermarket bumper that he has is getting in the way. And then back here, this diff drop, this cross member for the diff drop is lower and is getting in the way. So we have to add some length to the spacer that comes with the kit. We're going to elongate it by 1.25 inches. And then on the front, we're going to put 1-inch spacers. We could have went a little bit less here, but for right now, it's going to work. So Viet and I are going to lift it up and get it started with the spacers. Maybe just hold it in the back right now. If you guys hold it in the back, I can hold the front.
Yep.
You got the whole thing right now?
Yep.
I'm just going to get one started. Okay, that one started. So we just rest that now. I'm going to get another one of these started. And for these bolts in the front, you put a lock washer and a flat washer. Okay, both of those are started. We can let go there. So for the center one, you use this spacer that they have. It has a larger flat washer and then a smaller flat washer. The large flat washer goes against a skid plate and the smaller one goes up against the cross member. And then for this bolt that you're going to use to go through, you put a lock washer and then this special recessed cup, I'll call it. And this is nice, so if you hit any type of obstruction like a rock or something, it's much less likely to damage the head of the bolt, which is really important if you ever have to take the skid plates off again, which you will, and you won't have difficulty getting a socket on there. Okay, now we'll lift it into place. Okay, I got that one started. We have the front 3 bolts started, and then we have this center one with the spacer started. I'm just gonna run these up a little bit, not all the way. I'm gonna keep them a little loose, and that's because the next skid plate, the transmission skid plate, has to fit above the front skid plate. They bolt up together, so we can't get the center one all the way tight because then we won't be able to slip the transmission one in. So I'm just gonna tighten these up a little bit. Okay, that's good enough. And now we're gonna lower the vehicle to the ground because like I said, the front arm of the 2-post lift is in the way of getting the transmission skid plate in position on the frame. In preparation of fitting the transmission skid plate onto the rig, we're gonna attach the cross member that enables it to affix to either frame rail. And to give you an orientation of how this goes together, this is the front of the skid plate, this is the rear of the skid plate. And this aluminum has an L bend, it's a 90-degree bend, and the back side of the bend goes towards the back side of the skid plate. So that's how you orient it. The fasteners you use are a short bolt with a lock washer, and then you have the concave disc that you slide it through, and then they come up from underneath. So to get those 3 bolts in, I flipped over the cross member and I flipped over the skid plate, and I'm just gonna lay it down and then line them up. And I'm just giving these each a few turns. I'm just gonna keep it loose. I don't want anything tight just yet. Just enough to where the bolts don't fall out. Okay, so now we're gonna get underneath the vehicle and line up the cross member with the holes in the frame and get those bolts started. We ran into another issue based off of how Vincent's truck was already modified, and that is the bolt-on rock rails. They use a U-bolt that captures the frame rail, and look where the cross member needs to be for the transmission skid plate. It's right in the same spot. So what we had to do is drill and open up the bottom hole for this rock rail U-bolt, and then we were just barely able to make it work to where the U-bolt slid over the bracket for the transmission skid plate, and it's going to work out. And then you see that this is a good lift point for the 2-post lift. So we now have it jacked up in the air so we can work more comfortably instead of on our backs. Again, more mods, more problems. We have the cross member in position. And remember, I connected this up to the transmission skid plate at first, thinking that that would be the smart move. But after we discovered the issue with the fitment with the rock rails, then we decided to just put up the cross member first. And I think in retrospect, that's probably the better way to go. Put the cross member up first and then get the transmission skid plate in place. And that's what we're going to do right now. But before we get the transmission skid plate in place, we have to get this plate with a threaded hole in it into this cross member. So we could feed it up like this and then center it, because the transmission skid plate is gonna attach in 3 spots. At the plate that I just installed, 1 bolt over here, and then another bolt over here. So now we're gonna grab the skid plate and slide it into place. So I'm gonna lift up the transmission skid plate, and it needs to go in between the cross member and the engine skid plate so it sits above it. Just like that. And then while holding the back of the skid plate, I'm gonna line up one of these holes for the connection to the cross member we just installed earlier. Okay, I've got that one started. I'm gonna get the other 2. Okay, I've got all 3 of those started. Now I'm gonna install the 2 bolts that attach the transmission skid plate to the engine skid plate. It uses the shorter bolt with a lock washer into one of these recessed cups. And then I'm gonna get the other one started. So now we're gonna bolt up the transmission skid plate to this cross member that goes right underneath the transmission and transfer case. There is a bolt that's going to be longer, and that's going to go into the plate that we slid into the cross member right in this position. So I'm going to go ahead and just get that one started first. Okay, I got it started, and then I'm going to get the other one started, and they are a shorter bolt. They are 35 millimeter. This is a 50 millimeter. Okay, I've got all of them started. Now that we have all the fasteners in, before I tighten them up, I need to show you another problem that was created by that diff drop. And it creates a situation where there's now a gap in between the transmission skid plate and the cross member for the transmission skid plate. So we're going to have to get some spacers for this. And it was all caused because of how far down this cross member is for the diff drop. It screwed up a whole lot. So if you also have a diff drop on your LX470 or your 100 series Land Cruiser, be forewarned that you're going to have to buy spacers and some longer M8 by 1.25 pitch bolts to make this application work. I'm going to start at the back and tighten these up and then work my way forward. All of these bolts have a 13 millimeter head. The next 3 I'm going to do, remember, those are the 3 that attach to the skid plate cross member, and there's no spacer there, so I have to be careful right now how much I tighten these. I'm just going to snug them up, because if I just keep driving the bolt in, I'm going to bend the skid plate. For some of these cups that the bolts go through, they're not perfectly lining up, and it could be because of the differential drop. I'm not 100% sure. When Vincent gets the spacers for this application, he's just going to probably have to open up the hole a little bit with a file or Dremel, something of that nature, to where these cups will sit flush. Vincent and I are now working on the transfer case skid plate, and we figured out where this cross member for that skid plate needs to go. This cutout goes right around the exhaust. It basically sits right underneath the connection of the rear drive shaft at the transfer case. And then it attaches to this bolt hole on the frame. We'll take this off and we'll show you the lineup of the bolt and the washer combo and the lock nut on top. But we just figured out that the transfer case skid plate also utilizes this cross member underneath the transmission and transfer case. So we're going to have to loosen these bolts up and maybe a few in the front to where we can slide the transfer case skid plate above it and then bolt it all back together. So just to give you an idea of what you do, you put the small washer onto the bolt, and then up above you're going to have a bigger flat washer and then the nylon lock nut. Just like that. So I'm going to loosen up these bolts so we can slide the skid plate in between the cross member and the transmission skid plate. So looking at the skid plate, this side is the front and this side is the back. So I'm going to slide this in, and I'm going to use the two shortest bolts in the kit for the transfer case skid plate. Again, you put a lock washer and then you stick it into the cup. Okay, both of those are started. And then now I have to come back here and get some of these fasteners back in. One thing to note is the plate that we stuck into this transmission cross member, the transfer case skid plate also comes with one of those plates that you can insert in, because Asfir doesn't know if you're going to buy the whole belly of skid plates. So they have to prepare you to have all the fasteners if you're just buying one or the other. So since that plate is already in there, we don't have to install it from this kit. I did end up removing some of the other fasteners here, so I have to get those reinstalled. I'm not going to show it because we already showed it once. And then once I get those back in, then I'll start cinching everything up. In retrospect, I'm not going to put these 3 bolts back in because Vincent is just going to have to take them out anyways to install the spacers that we need to install because of the diff drop. So I'm just going to leave these out. So there it is there. So now I'm going to tighten up all of the bolts that secure the transfer case skid plate to the transfer case cross member, and then I'll lastly tighten up the bolts that hold the transfer case cross member to the frame. Now I got to figure out what size these bolts and nuts are and cinch those up. This bolt and nut combo is a 17 millimeter. So I'm going to use an open end wrench at the top to hold the nut, and then I'm going to use my Milwaukee M12 half-inch drive gun to tighten it up. Both of those bolts and nuts are tight. And then now onto the gas tank skid plate. We looked at the diagram and we're pretty stoked on how Asfir designed the skid plate for the gas tank. It just goes underneath the existing skid plate, which is pretty slick. You don't have to take the OEM one down and replace it. It just goes on top of it, and it's additional protection. There's 2 small plates that slide into the holes right here, and this is the front of the vehicle, and that's the back of the vehicle. So we already got one installed there. I'm going to slide the second one in. Maybe I go this way first. Let's see. Yeah. And then you just got to line that hole up. There's 2 other ones that we have to install, and they're both different size than the first 2, which are the smallest ones. There's a medium one and then there's a big one. So coming back here, The big one goes right here. This is the driver's side, and this is the rear of the vehicle. This is the rearmost hole on the gas tank skid plate, and this is towards the passenger side right there. Okay, we've got them all in place, and then we'll just put up the skid plate and bolt it in place. Similar to the other bolt and washer and disc combo, you put a lock washer onto the shank of the bolt, and then it slides into the cup. I'm gonna get this thing up and hold it in place and get them started. Okay, I've got one started. I'm gonna get one started on the front now. Okay, I got one on the front. Now I'm just gonna get the rest of them in. Okay, and the last one back here. We got all 4 bolts started. Now we're just gonna cinch them up with the Milwaukee gun. And there it is. The gas tank skid plate is in place. The final thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my gear wrench flex head ratchet, and I'm just going to double check the tightness of all the fasteners because I zipped them in with the Milwaukee gun, but I always like double checking, making sure everything is nice and tight before I call a job complete. All right, so here's a final look at the full belly of skid plates from Asfir for a LX470 or a 100 series Land Cruiser. And because we can, let's show you what it looks like going from the rear towards the front. All right, we are all done with installing a full belly of Asfir aluminum skid plates on an LX470, which would be the same for a 100 series Land Cruiser. As you saw, we ran into some difficulties because of how Vincent modified his truck. The front bumper interfered with the front skid plate. The diff drop made it complicated for the front skid plate, for the transmission skid plate, and we had to use spacers. And that's just how it goes when you do more mods. This isn't the fault of Asfir 4x4 because they can't foresee all the different modifications people could do to their rig and how they can affect the fitment of their skid plates. So the diff drop messed us up. The bolt-on rock rails messed us up a little bit. So we got it done, but it's unfortunate that I wasn't able to show you a much more straightforward and easy install like this should have been. I believe that this full belly of aluminum skid plates from Asfir 4x4 is going to do a great job of protecting all of the critical drivetrain components and the gas tank for Vincent's LX470. If you are an actual aggressive four-wheeler, I am confident that these skid plates are going to protect your rig very well. With all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We will of course be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Click on that subscribe button. Also click on that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when we put up new content on our channel, which we are always putting up very helpful and sick mods kind of content like this video here. Peace out, happy wrenching, happy skid plate installing. Bye-bye.